Well, it is 11 o'clock, so we might as well get started. It's good to see you guys today. Thanks for your faithful attendance. You know, I thought today, well, first I guess we should probably start in prayer. That's what we normally do, right? It's a church after all. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you for this opportunity to gather. Thank you that you give us minds to understand your commandments, that you give us the opportunity, the freedom, and the desire to debate them, to interpret them, to understand them more fully through conversation. Guide us in your will that we may more completely and more fully understand you through the loving of your Spirit with our minds today. Lord, watch over the people of Israel and Palestine as they continue to experience violence, persecution, and horror. Protect them, watch over them. May your presence be with them now and always, especially with those who are grieving the loss of their loved ones, who are held hostage, and who are experiencing grievous injury. In your holy name we pray. Amen. So I thought, hi G, it's weird having a mic on when all of you guys are like within talking distance. So this is gonna, I know, we could. But yeah, I thought today we would talk about, we start with a little thought exercise, and then we'll kind of go into Luther's understanding of the Eighth Commandment. So obviously we're talking about today the Eighth Commandment of do not bear false witness. And this last week, for those of you who were here last week, I talked a little bit about Immanuel Kant, who's a philosopher in the Enlightenment period, and he came up with this ethical theory, which is not new, but he is famous for using it and for having an especially good ethical theory around the idea of universal law. So he being a European in the, when was he alive? Late 1500s, early 1600s-ish. I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me. People online, I might have gotten that wrong. So look it up and email me. Anyway, he was he was a Western German European, and so he was a part of a Christian culture, so most of his laws, and he was Christian himself, but most of his universal laws were based on our Ten Commandments. So one of those laws was do not lie, right? We generally speaking shouldn't lie, and if that's a universal law, then we are always supposed to follow it. So the way that Kant talked about his universal laws was basically there's a certain order that we should follow. There's certain laws that we should always follow in order to live well in society. The intent is to live well amongst our peers and to live well with God. And so we should always follow the laws regardless of what's going on around us, because at the end of time, when we're judged, we'll be judged on our ability to follow the law. And so if something happens as a result of us following the law, we can just say, well, I was following the universal law. My actions are innocent because I was doing what was right under the law. So one of those laws is do not lie. The other two major ethical theories, by the way, are utilitarianism, which is basically seeking the best possible good at any given time. You could think of that as like if somehow you could commodify or measure the goodness of an action, you should always do the action that has the most possible good as the outcome. So like one action is worth 10 goods and one action is worth 12 goods. You should do the action that's worth 12 goods. And that's a very basic and confusing way to explain it. And then the other is virtue theory, which is based on a set of moral norms, virtues. So like wisdom or courage or piety or something like that, which are three of the five that Aristotle, who's kind of the father of virtue theory, talks about in his theory. So, like, in any given situation, you should choose the thing that's the most wise, the most courageous, the most pious. Given the situation, you should try to be virtuous. Anyway, so one of Kant's laws is do not lie, which seems good, right? We should always follow that. You think? Should always not lie. Right.
Well, one of the questions I had regarding that is if you're going to hurt somebody's feelings, then where does that fall?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it worth, I mean, it's not major life, but I mean,
Sure.
if you're going to hurt their feelings, like one of their loved ones is going to die and you say they're doing okay type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, is that breaking the commandment?
Yeah, that's a good question. What do you guys think? Is lying to protect someone's feelings breaking the commandment, or should we be so? So there's multiple ways to understand that. But on the one side, if we're thinking of it like this, should we lie to protect someone's feelings, or should we be brutally honest? We'll take the two extremes. Brutal honesty, that's just like, I was being honest. I'm not going to lie, so I'm going to tell you that I think you're a jerk and that you have a stupid-looking nose. You know, like that's not nice. And you're judging, yeah, other things, but it's honest, right? And then on the other side, it's saying that you're going to be okay when you're very clearly not, or something like that. What do you guys think?
Well, they have based on what we're saying. If you have options,
Mm-hmm.
doing the most.
Sure.
So if you're looking at doing the most, I mean,
Well, so
you
we'll.
can take it to extreme and say, I mean, and I'm sure that's happened for people, that they've had to lie in order to save lives.
Sure.
Save wartime or something like that.
Sure.
You're hiding a Jew, during the Holocaust.
Right. So that's actually interestingly the thought experiment that I was going to bring up was, say you are in Nazi Germany, right, and you are hiding Jews from the Holocaust, and this is kind of a classic thought experiment in philosophical circles, and the Nazis come knocking, and you know if you lie they'll walk away, they'll trust you, but if you don't, they'll take the Jews and kill them, and they will probably take your family and kill them as well. So they come and knock at your door and they say, are you hiding Jews? Should you be honest? Should you lie or should you not? According to universal law, you should not lie. What do you guys think about that? So let's talk about universal law as, yeah. Yeah. Is there a higher good? And intent is key. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, what's the intent of the lie? And under a strict reading of universal law, intent isn't important necessarily. It's did you lie or did you not lie? Because God or whatever judgment, if we want to take it out of a specifically Christian structure, will judge you according to this ethical theory based on whether or not you are lying. So then your question is there a higher good? Well, the highest good is God, and God has given us these laws. So should we obey the law? Okay, what's the gray area? So what would you say? What would you say? Mm-hmm. 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 So the thing a universal law ethicist would say, you're not complicit in whether or not this person, the Nazis will kill this person. The Nazis will be breaking the law if they kill someone, so they'll be condemned under the law. But you, as someone whose responsibility is to lie or not lie, will be condemned under the law if you lie.
But if you know that they're going to kill you,
Right.
then you're complicit if you tell the truth.
Under a strict reading of universal law, you would not be. You are called to not lie in this situation. And at the end of time, God will judge you for your not lying, not your complicity in killing. Because complicity is different. If you're told, never lie, and you lie, then you've lied. Whether you've broken, whether someone else has taken your lie and broken another commandment, it's not on you. You lied.
Well,
Thank God for Jesus. So what we're talking about is a hole in the logic of the universal law ethical theory, right? So because there's a flaw in this logic, because you guys are all right, we should probably not lie. We should probably lie if it means someone's going to die, right? So there's something wrong with either one, the ethical theory of universal law, or there's something wrong with the way that we're phrasing the law, or both. There's one of three problems. So another way, though, to answer this is in a positive sense, right? There's the Ten Commandments as they're written in the Old Testament. Honor your parents. Don't kill. Don't commit adultery. Don't lie. Don't covet. These universal laws that we all are familiar with, and they all except honor your parents and keep the Sabbath, are related to not doing something. So what are they in a positive sense? This is sort of what we've been talking about throughout these Ten Commandment series and in our sermons, and also in these classes, at least the ones that I've taught, have been about what does this mean in a positive sense? And all this comes out of a long theological tradition, but it also comes out of the long large catechism, what we as Lutherans use a lot, that comes from the Book of Concord, like I talked about last week. So let's talk about what the three, or what the Ten Commandments would look like if we used a positive paradigm rather than a negative paradigm. So under the paradigm of treat others as you want to be treated, right? The golden rule that Jesus puts out, part of love God, love your neighbor as yourself, is treat others how you want to be treated. So the third one would be, on Sabbath would be, allow others to find holy rest as you find holy rest. Watch out for others and watch out for your family and do well by your family as you want your family to do well and watch out for you. The fifth one of do not kill, protect others' bodies and live as you, protect others' bodies and lives as you want your body and life to be protected. The sixth one about adultery, be faithful to others as you want them to be faithful to you. The seventh one, protect others' possessions and livelihoods as you want your possessions and livelihoods to be protected. So now the eighth one, do not lie. Luther says that it's not about lying, but it's about protecting another person's reputation. So in a treat others as you want to be treated, it would say protect others' reputations as you want them to protect your reputation. The quote from Luther from the Large Catechism says, God does not want our neighbors deprived of their reputations, honor, and character any more than their money and possessions. He wants everyone to maintain self-respect before spouse, child, servant, and neighbor. That comes from the beginning of Luther's portion of the large catechism on the eighth commandment. So does considering the eighth commandment rather than do not lie ever, never, ever, ever, never, never, never lie, does that solve the question of what should we do when the Nazis knock at our door? If we instead consider the eighth commandment, protect the reputation of your neighbor. How would we then answer the Nazis' question, are you hiding Jews? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, so you would say that's lying to the Nazis follows the fifth commandment, protect the lives and bodies of your neighbors. And also the eighth commandment, protect the reputation. Exactly. What do you guys think? What do other folks think? Mm-hmm.
You're looking at,
Right.
are you then looking at, by obeying one commandment, you're breaking another commandment?
What do you mean?
Well, if I'm supposed to protect my neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember, going back to that, but then I lie, that does not protect them.
So if we are interpreting the Ten Commandments to be protect your neighbors bodies, protect your neighbors' reputations, we're interpreting do not lie as protect your neighbors' reputations. So would lying be protecting our neighbor's reputation? No. Brian, you're shaking your head.
In this case,
How so?
well, it depends on which one you consider the neighbor.
Well, they're both your
They're
neighbor.
not saying-
Well, they're both your neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. They're both my neighbor. It's like, I was thinking the other, with my meditation that came up this morning,
Mm-hmm.
was about we're to love everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God tells us to love everyone. So I'm thinking, I mean, we know what's in the, you just said a prayer for what's going on
Mm-hmm.
in Israel and the Middle East right now, and I'm thinking Hamas. And I'm thinking the whole thing, so, no, I'm supposed to love that person that did that horrible,
Mm-hmm.
you know, killing.
Mm-hmm.
That's the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. So,
Would it be worse to tell the truth and cause the death, the innocent death of somebody else, or lie and the lie of somebody else?
I would say in this situation, if we're so putting aside what I was talking about earlier, a very legalistic, never lie reading, I would interpret that as wrong. I was defending it earlier for the sake of conversation, but I interpret that as wrong. I don't think that we should lie, or I don't think that we should tell the truth if the truth means that a person that we are protecting dies. I think in the given scenario, the person who's hiding Jews should lie about hiding Jews because they are protecting the body and the reputation of both the Jew that they're hiding and the Nazi that they're lying to. They are not giving them the opportunity to ruin their reputation, right? Now, it gets complicated though because we shouldn't just go around lying. Like getting back to Brian, the thought experiment you brought up of should we soften the truth or should we lie to someone? Should we, if, you know that scene in Saving Private Ryan where Vin Diesel's character is dying and Tom Hanks's character is saying, "You're going to be just fine, you're going to be just fine." Should he be saying that, or should he be honest and say, "You know what? No." I think there's a way to do it well. There's a way. I don't think that that don't lie or protect your neighbor's reputation, however you want to interpret the law, gives us freedom to just go around being a jerk, right? To go up saying, "You know, I think you have an ugly nose." Like that, it's honest, but it's not nice.
Wasn't there a thing with the Jim Carrey that had that thing where he couldn't tell,
Right.
he had to tell the truth?
Right. Yeah. Was it Yes Man or what was that movie? Anyway, but yeah, exactly. So what is there a way to be honest in a way that protects people? And I would say absolutely. You just have to sometimes.
We kind of call it white light.
Yeah, but that I would say in the scenario of like the Saving Private Ryan scene, there's a way to kindly and in a way that witnesses to God's loving grace say, "Yeah, you're gonna die," saying, "Yes, and God will meet you on the other side, and I'll miss you desperately, and I'll be here with you until you die." There's a way to say, to be honest, that's not brutal. You know, this isn't, I don't interpret this commandment to be permission to just go around lying. Right. And then so we could talk about too, or to go around being a jerk about honesty. Also, understanding it as protecting a person's reputation is not permission to just go around lying. This actually gets into what Luther spends most of his time in the Large Catechism talking about, which is perjury and slander in a legalistic sense. So part of the eighth commandment, do not lie, is specifically related to the legal system, and that's kind of what Pastor Tim talked some about on Sunday. Under the eighth commandment, this ensures that people have legal rights. You have a right to a fair and just trial, and part of that is that the judge, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and the witnesses are honest, and they.
And that's kind of why perjury
Right.
is such a big,
Exactly.
condemn.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's such consequences for that.
Right. One should not perjure themselves. People have a right to a fair trial. People have a right to the truth. And so this gets into lying about someone, right? Should we, in order, as we seek to protect a person's reputation, should we perjure ourselves? So like say we're a character witness in a trial for someone, right? And we go on the stand and we say, in our pursuit of protecting someone's reputation, we perjure ourselves and we say, "No, yeah, this person's a great person, you know, they're wonderful," knowing full well that, yeah, they probably did commit this crime because they're a terrible person. Like, no, I don't think that's, and Luther would also say that's not what the eighth commandment calls us to. Rather, we should let a person's reputation, in protecting a person's reputation, we should let their reputation honor and reflect their character. So if someone's a crook, we should let them be a crook. It doesn't mean that we have to lie on their behalf. But it also doesn't mean that we should go around spreading rumors about people or not protecting a good and decent person's reputation, right? So back to the perjuring aspect of the eighth commandment It's protecting people from unjust treatment under a legal system. So in our American legal courts, this is protecting that within this microcosm, do not lie is the correct way to interpret this law, because the courts are after the truth, right? So if the courts or other places of authority are dishonest, then the court is breaking the eighth commandment, because it's accepting bribes, it's allowing perjury, it's perjuring itself. Just in the same way as an individual witness who lies on the stand or what have you is committing perjury and breaking the commandment. So Luther, interestingly, says in the explanation of the eighth commandment that people in authority generally, judges in particular, must be people of the highest character. And then it's interesting because he goes into the church afterward as another example of where people in leadership in the church must be under the highest, people of the highest character. So and he says in legal proceedings and in the church are two places where do not lie is paramount and also protect a person's reputation, or honor a person's reputation, right? So like if I stood up on a Sunday and started lying about theology, that would be bad, especially if I did it for personal gain. And I stood up here and said, God said, I was talking to God earlier, as I do, because I'm a pastor, and God said that you should give me more money, or you should buy this thing from me so that I make millions of dollars, or God told me that the church should buy a private jet so that we can do ministry by flying to France because I want to go to France, right? Like that's lying about the will of God. That's not honoring my reputation or anyone else's reputation in the church. And it's the same with like selling snake oil or something like that. That's breaking the eighth commandment because we're lying about the content of scriptures. We're lying about the content of theology. And I mean, the same could be said for any harmful theology, whether it's God hates blank. If we say God is love, we can't say God hates, period. God hates an individual, God hates a people group, God hates anything. No, God is love.
God hates actions.
I mean, I would say God mourns actions that break the commandments. I don't think God hates, period.
He doesn't hate people. People that do the actions. If he hates like the actions. God hates evil. What? God hates evil.
God, I would say God mourns evil. Evil is against what God is. But if God is love, God doesn't hate anything. Period. I would say God mourns.
Where it talks about God hating something. It's in scripture. I can't pull it up right now.
I think that the portions of the Bible where God condemns things are God's lamenting them because they are against what God is, right? Rather than because God hates anything. Like the apocryphal stories of the devil being, because the stories of Lucifer falling from being a fallen angel, etc., is it might be present in the Catholic extra books of the Bible, but it's not present in the Protestant books. So even then, God's, if we take that and see Lucifer or Satan or whatever you want to call it, the anthropomorphization, the making a person of evil. I would say God doesn't hate evil. God mourns and laments evil and wants it to cease.
Maybe a bit more than saying hate God, the action angers
Sure,
rather than more hate.
sure. In the same way that a parent hates or is angered by a child's bad decision.
I mean, wasn't anger displayed by Jesus in the temple?
Sure,
Yeah.
because they were doing something that's wrong and anathema to God. But I would say that Jesus did it out of love, not out of hate.
But he was angry.
Sure,
He got it, that was
but anger, sure,
displayed.
yeah. But I would say anger is not
It's
not the same as hate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, back to
Because he didn't hate people that were doing that. He just hated what was being done. What's that?
I would say he was angered by what was being done.
He was angered, but he wasn't.
I think this is a great conversation we could have at a different time.
Okay.
So anyway, harmful theology, saying this tragic thing happened because your faith isn't strong enough, or you're going to hell because you do or do not do something that I do or do not do, is not good and harmful theology. And I think that is not faithful to the eighth commandment, because it's harming people and it's not protecting a person's reputation in a key and important way, because our core reputation, who we are at the center of our being, is a beloved child of God. And any theology that does not witness to that is a lie and should be condemned absolutely under the eighth commandment. And so again, that's not protecting our neighbor, that's not loving our neighbor, that's not honoring who they are and their reputation. And it's a lie. And so Luther has this interesting thing he talks about. If you can't prove it, don't say it, right? And this is true in the court of law, this is true in a church, this is true in our personal lives. And this gets sort of into the third part of Luther's interpretation of the eighth commandment in the Large Catechism, which is gossip. And because gossip isn't lying per se. I would be being honest if I said, I heard Brian's wearing a Hawaiian shirt. That's not a lie, but it's also gossip if I say, I heard, I don't know, some form of gossip that's not good, right? Like when a person gossips, they're not protecting a person's reputation, right? But that's not necessarily a lie, because it's honest. If I said, I heard so and so was down at the bars and couldn't stand up straight, that wouldn't be a lie because someone else told me that, but it's not protecting that person's reputation. It's not honoring who they are, right? So I think this is an interesting example of how do not lie doesn't fully encapsulate what the eighth commandment is talking about. It's talking about protecting.
You can say a truth, but it could be
Right.
not damaging to somebody's reputation.
Exactly. In the same way as saying, I think someone being brutally honest and saying, I think someone has an ugly nose. Exactly. It's like my mom used to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And I think this comes into the gossip and the idea of, if you can't prove it, don't say it, are really interesting, because it comes into a larger conversation about Lutheran understandings of offices. So in our theology, we understand different people occupying different offices. So as a pastor, I occupy the office of pastor. You all and God together have appointed me into the office of pastor. So that's why I get to wear a stole. It's the sign of my office. That's why I get to stand up and preach, because that is something that people in my office do. That's why I get to do baptisms. That's why I get to commune, because that's my role within the community. You all and God have appointed me as pastor. So that's what allows me to do it. It's not because I'm ontologically changed, as the Catholics would say, that God has done something unique within me to change me, that I can now preside at the sacraments. It's because you all and God have called me to be in this position. The same could be said for any position, including a judge. So in our legal system, in a Lutheran understanding of our legal system, we would say that a judge is in the office of judge. They wear the big gown and they wear the thing around their neck, and they get to be called judge, and they get to sit up at the big high bench, because that's what those are the signs of their office. And they have the gavel, exactly. And the bailiff says, "All rise for the honorable judge so-and-so." Those are signs of the office. It doesn't mean that they're any better or any different from us. One would hope that they're people of the highest character. But the reason they're in that office is because all of us and God have called them to do that. So those people are the people within our society who have given, just like you all have given me permission to preside at communion, we have given judges authority to offer judgment in cases. And so when someone is acting in the role of judge, they can judge. But everything else, unless we are called not to judge, right? We're called to love our neighbor. We're called to honor and protect their reputation. We're called to not gossip, because gossip is judging someone without the facts. The only person really who has all the facts is God. And like I talked about 2 weeks ago, like we talk about every week, God has chosen not to judge, and instead God has chosen to forgive and to redeem. So even though the people who are appointed as judges are appointed to gather all of the facts that are available and make a judgment, they still get it wrong, because no matter what, they don't have all the facts, as God does. So I think this is where we really get into protecting a person's reputation, right? We get into what the difference between gossip and judgment. Because if we're not appointed as judges, all of the judgment that we do, that we talk about, is gossip. And it's not protecting a person's reputation. Now, granted, when we're in a court, we're called to be honest. We're not called to protect a person who has a bad person's reputation, right? Luther talks about honoring a person's reputation, and I wrote it down over here. Luther talks about, where was it? If a person's a crook, let them be a crook. Don't protect a bad person's good reputation. Let a person make their reputation themselves and honor it. But that also means that we shouldn't gossip. And so I think generally speaking, we know the difference between gossip and honesty and protecting a person's reputation. So there's one of the things is that the way that I like to see it is gossip harms the person being talked about, whereas not allowing justice harms the people around that person. So like, if someone stole something, we're not called to lie on their behalf. We're not called to protect their good reputation because because they're not a good person. We're called to be honest and say, yeah, that person did steal that thing, right? So I think it's fairly easy to understand the difference. So Luther kind of ties all this together in a really interesting way. By the way, he calls people who gossip backbiters, which I think is funny. But Luther says, even less may you sit in judgment or spread rumors if you are not really sure and have it only from hearsay. But if you say, why should I say it if it is not the truth? Answer, why don't you bring it before a proper judge? Oh, I can't prove it publicly. I might be called a liar and sent away in disgrace. Ah, my dear, now do you smell the roast? Which, smelling the roast is really funny because that's a slang term in the 16th century for like what we would say now, do you smell what I'm stepping in, kind of thing? Or like, do you smell what's cooking? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Things like that. But the fact that now do you smell the roast made it into our founding theological documents, I think is hilarious. Yeah, I think the key here is if there's something important that you've seen a person doing, you should honor their reputation, honor who they are, by telling a judge this person stole something. And actually, in the Large Catechism, Luther goes into a piece which he pulls from Matthew 18:15 that says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. And if he doesn't listen, then go tell a judge. So Luther and Jesus, and also Paul in, I can't remember which letter it is, lay out a fairly clear, I think it's Corinthians, one of the letters to the Corinthians. Anyway, lay out a very clear way to engage someone who has done something wrong in a way that honors their reputation and doesn't break the 8th commandment. First, you go to the person and say, hey man, I heard you stole something. You know, can you bring it back? And if they say, no, I didn't steal anything, what are you talking about? And you know clearly that they stole something, well then you should go to a judge and you should say, hey, this person stole something. And then allow the judge to fill the judge's office of judgment, yeah.
In that case, not recording, that sounds fine. When you have gone to them and said, I can do
Mhm.
do you then have to take the next step and report it to somebody else?
What do you think?
That's probably what it's like. It's so common.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that that's the level of somebody that, has $100,000. And yet,
Right, so I think
it's the wrong that is the onus on you to go forward and tell,
Mhm.
or are you only obligated to not lie if you're asked if you know something?
So I think this comes back to the question of honoring a person's reputation. So it seems to me that there's a difference between a 12-year-old kid stealing a comic book and someone who embezzles hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right? It's just like there's a difference between someone who is in possession of
So then there's,
a joint and someone who's smuggling cocaine across international borders. They should be treated differently. And the key is what honors their personhood, their reputation. So the kid who steals the comic book, you go to him and you say, I know you stole a comic book. You're 12. You're not that creative. And he says, no, I didn't. What are you talking about? And then you go and you find the comic book and you say, you stole the comic book. Should this person be turned over to a judge and be condemned? Well, exactly. If the judge is his parent, then right. But thinking in a fairly legalistic sense, probably not. But then on the other side, if someone is embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars and you catch them in it and you say, hey, you're doing this. Stop. Turn yourself in. And they say, I don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm not. And then you go to them and you say, here's the books. Yes, you are. And they still say, no, I'm not. And they don't turn themselves in for judgment themselves to seek justice. Then it's your obligation to go and allow justice to be done. And I think that the key difference there is honoring a reputation, right? Is the 12-year-old kid, is he as in his person a thief? Is he in his person someone who knowingly and wantingly steals all the time? Probably not. He's probably 12 and he stole a comic book because he wanted it. And when you go, don't steal anymore, he's going to listen. Whereas this person who's been embezzling for 30 years and has racked up like several $100,000, they're not a good person, and their reputation should honor that about them. It doesn't mean that we hate them. It doesn't mean that we judge them, but we allow justice to be done. And then the other thing that we shouldn't do, right, is gossip about it. We shouldn't say, we saw this, or we heard from someone else that so-and-so is embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then we go over here and we say, I heard so-and-so is embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars. That doesn't help anything, because maybe we're wrong over here, and they're trying to drag their reputation through the mud. But this person, but if that person actually is, then what we should do is we go, hey, in this, someone's gossiping to you, I heard, and then you go and says, they're embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you go to them and you say, hey, I heard that you're embezzling money. And they say, no, I'm not. And they show you the books, and clearly they're not. Then it's your job then to honor their reputation by saying, no, this person is not. In the same way that if you hear gossip and you go to the person and they say, actually, yeah, I am. It's your job then, you're under the 8th commandment, to help them honor their reputation by being honest and saying, hey, I need to come forward that I've been embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's just wrong, and I screwed up, and it's important that I face the consequences under a just legal system. So I think the interpretation of the 8th commandment, do not lie, is very, very narrow. It allows for things like we talked about at the beginning. Hey, you're in Nazi Germany, and the Nazis come and ask you, are you hiding a Jew? And you say, yeah, I am. And then they die. It allows for that. And then on the other side, it allows for you to freely say, I heard so-and-so is embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars, because you're not lying, you did hear that. So understanding the 8th commandment in a very narrow legalistic sense doesn't honor the law. It doesn't honor our neighbors. It doesn't fall under the love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Rather, understanding the eighth commandment as honor and protect the reputation of your neighbor as you would want your reputation honored, I think is the right way to understand that eighth commandment. So we've got 10 more minutes.
I think there's a gray area in part of that, because somebody is rather than going and talking to somebody and telling them you know they've embezzled.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I do that. I go the law first,
Mm-hmm.
because they could, especially today,
Mm-hmm.
come in and know somebody and they go and hang it out, shoot.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right.
Well, if you're a kid, this may get you. You're just bad, but
No, you're absolutely right. And a key part of this is safety. A terrible and tragic example of this would be something like sexual violence, right? Someone shouldn't go, the victim of sexual violence shouldn't make themselves unsafe by going to the person and saying, hey, you did this and it was really mean, especially if it's unsafe. That should never happen. Perfect example again of you go to the mob, right, and you walk boldly into a mob club and you say, I can't remember the main character or the mob boss in The Godfather. I can't remember his name, but what was it? Oh yeah, Don Corleone. So you go up to Don Corleone and you say, hey, I heard you're committing graft and you're a mob boss and you're participating in organized crime. You should probably stop. He's gonna kill you. So you shouldn't do that. But I'm thinking in a situation where it's safe, in a situation where it's honoring their reputation, because going to Don Corleone and saying, I think you might be committing graft and organized crime, that's not protecting their reputation at all. Whereas if I heard that you were taking money out of the offering plate or something, and I said, Brian, have you been taking money out of the offering plate? You wouldn't probably punch me in the face. I'd hope not. I would appreciate it if you didn't. But, right, exactly. But that's the thing. You wouldn't anyway. So coming to you and saying, hey, I heard that this is going on. And you would say, no, thank you for coming to me and asking, rather than standing up on a Sunday and saying, Brian's been stealing money out of the offering plate. Judge him, right? That's not honoring your reputation. In the same, again, it's not. This is where universal law falls short, because no matter how you interpret a universal law, there's always going to be, well, what about this example, or what about this example, and so what, in my view, seeing the Ten Commandments in a positive sense, in a honor your neighbor's reputation, that's much more of a virtue theory sort of understanding. It's an understanding of what ought we always do. We ought always honor our neighbor's reputation. So, in each given situation, we have to sit down and think, okay, in this given situation, how are my actions and the actions of those around me honoring this person's reputation? And in a situation with you and me in the offering plate, honoring your reputation is going to you directly. In the case of Don Corleone, honoring his reputation is going to the police, right? So it's different in each individual scenario. So it's important, and this is one of the interesting things about virtue theory. They say, virtue theorists would say, you cannot expect a child to understand virtue theory. Therefore, it is our job as adults, it's our job as people in authority to educate people in virtue, in the right action. Because you can give a virtue, and then this person's going to misinterpret it or is going to make a mistake in interpreting it, and that's okay. But the important thing is to learn how to do it right. So, I think that's probably the case in all 10 commandments, is that all 10 commandments are, in some ways, when you interpret them in a positive light, can be considered as virtues.
Is that probably the most broken commandment?
What's that?
The
The
eighth
most,
commandment?
the most broken commandment, the 8th commandment? I don't know. I think the 9th and 10th commandments are really, really hard because covetousness, coveting something, is almost a uncontrollable action. Like, man, I could really go for a brat right now. It's almost 12 o'clock, and that's what they're serving at prime time. And I'm coveting that of my neighbor right now because I'm hungry, not because, like, I really, it's almost a knee-jerk reaction. It takes a lot of time to train that. But yeah.
In light of what we've been having this week, I have on Facebook this week.
Yeah.
An anecdote that came up based on this old saying we used to say, liar, liar, pants on fire. Yeah, old kids, I know, your generation did that.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, wouldn't it be something if that was true? If everybody would lie and have pants on fire.
Oh, we
So
would
I
all.
responded, I said, well, boy, there would be a lot of smoke everywhere.
That's true. And I think that's what Luther talks about as well, is that at the beginning he says, he says this also in the portion on stealing, so like, he probably says it everywhere, but those are just the two that I've been reading most recently. But yeah, he talks about, you shouldn't, like, if we put everyone in prison for lying, everyone would be in prison. Because we can't get away with it, and that's where, like,
Well,
like you said earlier.
Pastor showed the state with the kids.
Yeah.
The scenario where they
Right.
play or not to.
Right, and that goes,
Age that they like.
yeah, and that goes into our conversation on virtue. If we're teaching our young people that it's okay to steal things and it's okay to lie about it, which I think it was interesting because the thing that I wanted to hear was how many of the kids, because they said there's a toy behind you, and if you don't turn around, the toy, you'll get the toy. So how many of those kids didn't turn around and listen to what they were told? You know, because he said the 4-year-olds or the 5-year-olds, 93% of them turned around, or 93% of them lied about it. How is that 93% of the people who turned around? And then the question is, well, if only 5 people turned around, then automatically you're right up close, or 10 people, or 9 people out of 75 kids turned around. Well, then there we are.
We're getting an example of both of the commandments you just said about coveting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's 12 o'clock, so I want to honor you guys' time, and I also want to go get the brats that I'm coveting. So, thank you. Let's pray before we head out. God, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss, to debate, to come to a more deep understanding of your law, of your commandments, of your encouragement for how to live well in this world. Thank you for all the times that we break the commandments, you forgive us. Thank you that your love, your forgiveness is unending and unimaginable, that you continue to forgive over and over and over every time we make a mistake and lie, every time we make a mistake and steal or dishonor someone. Lord, teach us to protect our neighbors' reputations. Teach us to watch over our neighbors and honor the reputation that is theirs, that they are a child of God. In your holy name we pray.